Hi, this is Rajesh once again with my YouTube channel Rajenomics. This is my second lecture today. The first lecture was on GDP. If you have not already viewed it, please view that so that you can understand this second lecture much better, which is an extension of the first lecture. As I told at the end of the lecture, that I will be talking about other concepts of GDP, that is GNP and NNP, gross national product and net national product. So let me talk, and after that I will also be talking about, is GDP a measure of well-being? If so, why so? If not, why not? So let me talk about GNP, gross national product, and how does it differ from GDP? So if you remember from my first lecture, I said GDP includes C plus I plus G plus X minus N. So C is consumer goods, the goods that are used for final consumption. I is investment made in capital goods such as plant and machinery that make consumer goods. G is government expenditure, and X minus N is difference between exports and imports. Now GNP has everything that GDP has. GNP has everything that GDP has, plus one more component, receipts from abroad, R, and P, payments made abroad. Receipts from abroad minus payments made abroad, the difference between the two is NFP, net factor incomes from abroad. NFI, net factor incomes from abroad. Let me explain this. It can happen that the capital and labor of your country is used in some other country and they earn income there. Similarly, the capital and labor of some other country is used, produces something here and they earn income here. So let me give an example. Suppose Toyota, the Japanese company, makes cars here in India. The value of that output which Toyota produces in India will be included in India's GDP. Since domestic, within the territory of India, the production by Toyota happened within the territory of India, so it will be included in India's GDP, but the value of that output will be included in Japan's GNP, but not in Japan's GDP. Similarly, if Tata Motors makes cars in UK, the value of the output produced by Tata Motors in UK will be included in UK's GDP, not in India's GDP, but in India's GNP. Hence, you have receipts from abroad and payments made abroad. That is, your capital and labor of your country, when it produces something in another country, and the capital labor of that country produces something in your country, when that component enters GDP, then you have receipts from abroad and payments made abroad, and you call it as net factor income from abroad. Totally, net factor income, just net factor income. So receipts from abroad and payments made abroad is another component which, when added to GDP, becomes GNP, gross national product. And again, let me make it clear, this particular figure will be either positive or negative depending upon whether receipts from abroad is more or payments abroad is more. So I think the distinction between GDP and GNP is clear. Then the next factor is NNP, net national product. The focus is on the word net, N-E-T, net. So what does it consist of? GNP, all this minus depreciation. GNP minus depreciation. Now what is this depreciation? You have investment made in capital goods. In this component, investment made in capital goods, I told, plant and machinery, tools and equipments, land and buildings. Over the years, by frequently using it, they become obsolete. They are subject to wear and tear. Their value falls down. The value of these capital goods, such as plant and machinery, tools and equipment, land and buildings, keep falling. They become obsolete after some time. So that value, that fall in that value is known as depreciation. So that needs to be provided for. Depreciation needs to be provided for. So when you subtract depreciation from GNP, what you get is NNP, net national product. So I think I made it clear. Now let me also dwell at length on discussing whether GDP, gross domestic product, is it a measure of well-being? Does it really measures the well-being of the country? There is a big debate on this, at least for the past some years, which has given rise to concept of green GDP, G-R-E-E-N, green GDP. Now, let us discuss why or why not we can say GDP a measure of well-being. On the face of it, if someone asks you is GDP a measure of well-being, probably the answer would be yes. Because what does GDP measure? The economic activity of the country. How much of consumer goods were produced, how much of investment happened, what were the exports. So all this, it measures the economic activity of the country. What you call it as economic growth, what you call it as economic growth is nothing but GDP. So obviously, if there is more and more GDP, there is economic growth in the country, then there is well-being. The answer will be yes. But if you carefully think about it, that GDP is coming, we are getting, our GDP is rising. But at what cost? At the cost of environmental damage? At the cost of ecological damage? Air pollution, sea pollution. So do we want such a GDP? Probably we do not want. Okay, many factories are set up, lots of production happens. The GDP of that country goes up, obviously. But with it, pollution has come, various types of pollution. Then there is damage to the environment. So, GDP, is it a measure of well-being? Maybe not, although it measures the economic activity, although it measures the prosperity of your country. Take another example. You are working for more number of hours. Suppose instead of 12 hours, you are working for 20 hours. Your spouse also works for say 20 hours in some office. You are also working in some factory. More and more number of hours. Fine, the GDP of the country will go. But are you getting the leisure? You are not getting the leisure. So the qualitative improvements are somewhere missing. So this is what is the basic limitation of GDP, because it doesn't take into account the qualitative improvement, things such as environmental damage, it doesn't consider, and hence the concept of green GDP has emerged in the recent past. The recent events of Joshimath is, for everyone knows by this time what has happened in Joshimath. We are told that there is lots of damage, ecological damage because of infrastructure, power plants being coming there. Maybe those power plants and all increase the prosperity, but at the same time there is some damage to the environment, and now people are facing hardship. So GDP at what cost? That is what we have to ponder. Probably that's the reason why it gave rise to another index called gross GNH, Gross National Happiness Index. I don't know how many of you know such an index exists. Gross National Happiness. This term was coined by Bhutan's king Jigme Sigme Wanchuk. Bhutan's king Jigme Sigme Wanchuk coined this term Gross National Happiness Index, and every year countries are ranked based on the happiness. Like this year, Finland tops the GNH list. So GDP, is it a measure of well-being or not, is a matter of debate, but ladies and gentlemen, finally everything boils down to GDP, because you are respecting the Committee of Nations increases with prosperity. You are seeing, how the GDP is going up, how is the economic growth in the country. So, but ultimately we also have to consider alternative measures. That's all from now. Thank you. In my next class, I will be saying some last words on GDP, and then I will be talking about an important concept in microeconomics. Thank you. Keep subscribing, view it, subscribe it, like it. And this is bye from Rajesh Gangakhetkar and from the channel Rajenomics. Thank you.